I recently got the opportunity to interview Matt Mullenweg, the co-founder of WordPress, in person at WordCamp Asia. Now, in case you haven't been following the WordPress news lately, there's a lot going on. I know many of us have strong opinions on either side of the spectrum, so there are just a few things I want to say first. This interview was my idea. I asked Matt if he would be willing to do an interview because I'm legitimately curious to get his perspective on the future of WordPress and open source. My goal was to let Matt speak freely and answer however he wished. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the most experienced in giving interviews, so I admit that I probably could have pressed him more at times. However, there are a few key takeaways that I got from the interview that I'll discuss after. So without further ado, let's teleport to Manila and interview Matt.
Welcome to WordCamp Asia in
Thank you.
Manila this year. It's been really fun.
Yeah, I always love traveling around to all the different WordCamps. So
Oh man, you learn so much. It's a great way to see the world.
yeah, and always somewhere new to explore.
I think there's people here from 71 countries.
Wow.
So, just walking around the halls, you can travel the world.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I would love to ask you some questions about your philosophy on open source,
Yeah.
the future of WordPress, your vision for where it's going. So, my first question is very high level, but it's just why did you choose to make WordPress open source?
That's a good question. Or did open source choose me?
Right.
From a very young age, a teenager really, I really appreciated open source projects.
Hmm.
So as I was just getting on the internet and learning and, doing my first web development and everything, um, I was broke as well. And so, finding open source solutions that were free were really exciting. So instead of Photoshop, I could run GIMP and I could run Linux on my computer. Um, I got really involved with sort of like hacking on Wi-Fi and 802.11b and some local user groups in Houston where I grew up. And yeah, so open source just felt like enabling. And I read some early essays of like Richard Stallman or Eric Raymond or some of the early philosophical underpinnings, and kind of became radicalized. Probably in addition, like reading Slashdot and Corrosion and some of the sites talking about it. But it just it felt to me like a really um, you know almost like a secular religion or philosophy that's incredibly humanist and really increases the freedom and autonomy that people have in the world.
Hmm.
And I became particularly enamored with the GPL license, which is one of the open source licenses, which says, I'm going to give you this freedom, and if you use it, don't take away freedom from anyone else. So the
Yeah.
freedom's viral, or it's sort of propagates. And so you asked about why WordPress. I was sort of using and hacking on and contributing to a project called B2, B2 Cafe Log.
Hmm.
It was from a fellow named Michel Valdredi from Corsica, France. And I was a volunteer on the forums. I think I eventually got commit or something and was active in it. The project kind of got abandoned. Michelle disappeared. And so there were 4 or 5 different forks. Someone could take an existing project and, take the code base, but put it under a new name. So like a new development path and new leaders. And WordPress was one of them. And so with Mike Little and myself, I decided to take the B2 code and continue it for both ourselves, but some of the other users. And we both had some contributions and code in the forums and everything. So it was fun. And he was in England. We had never met in person. Mike's also, I think, 15 or 20 years older than me. So we had a kind of a fun, had a lot of experience, a lot of ways. I had a lot of energy and youth and didn't know what I couldn't do. So it was a great combo.
And how has your perspective on open source evolved since you first started? Are there any key lessons that you've learned over the past 2 decades?
Oh yeah, that's more than just a license. That's really important. So, something I think that WordPress has demonstrated, especially vis-a-vis other sort of GPL CMSs that haven't been quite as successful, is that you really have to focus on the community as well. I like to tell, even all people making products, don't just make a product, make a movement.
Hmm.
And so with WordPress, we always try to give people something to believe in. We have some rules that go beyond the GPL. So for example, in our directories, we say the code has to be 100% GPL. It has to follow certain, it can't take user data without asking for permission. Things around privacy, stuff that is more like a good ecosystem. sort of rules that are above and beyond what just the license says to do or not. So it's kind of like what's legal versus what's good.
Sure.
So that's been a big part of um, something I've learned over the years, and yeah, and it takes work, you know. So open source doesn't happen by default. It really is the work of, in WordPress's case, thousands of people. 700 contributors just a few days
Mm,
ago at the contributor day here. Um, Bringing people on board is really important. So for us, the WordCamps,
mhm.
they sort of like community organized events. They happen, small ones, hundreds of cities over the years, and then we do these big ones, regional ones, 3 times a year. Um, Things like we have a kids camp here, so that brings in the youth. Um, there's these contributor days where there's different tables, whatever you're into, you can sit down at a table,
Mhm.
and people will teach you how to get involved and everything like that.
And what do you believe are the biggest challenges facing the open source movement today, and how can the community address them?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges, and I believe it was Dries from Drupal who coined this, and he talks about the maker versus taker problem.
Mm,
So you can have something in open source communities where, a lot of people will kind of use the software but don't contribute anything back.
mhm.
And so that can lead to sort of the thing they were using falling behind, or burning out the contributors because they're just like, wow, I'm doing all this work. Everyone else is
Right.
profiting from it. They're not giving anything back or any hours or any money or anything. So um, that's actually, I think, one of the things that happens to most open source projects, particularly ones that fail.
Mhm.
And as WordPress has grown, I think, it's attracted private equity and other things that um, don't yet, I think they will in the future, but don't might maybe yet have that sustainable mindset
Mm,
of, creating a flow of, benefiting from it and giving back and benefiting and giving back.
mm. And how do you envision the relationship between open source projects and for profit companies in the coming years?
Well, every for-profit company that we talked about is using a ton of open source. Whether that's Meta or NVIDIA, they're publishing a lot of open source. Actually, these companies, even some of the bad ones people don't like sometimes, um, you know, contribute a ton. Meta is a great example. I think they're one of the, they React and, the improvements they made to PHP and everything. Like I give them huge credit. Um, we also now have these open source AI models coming out of China, which are incredible. And they're going, DeepSeek just announced they're not just going to open source the model and the weights, they're now open sourcing the software they use to create it. This is wild.
Yeah.
Um, and as you've already seen, the impact of DeepSeek in just a few weeks on the AI space, which is already, a pretty exciting space. So, and these sorts of things now enable, open source projects like WordPress to leverage this,
Mm.
you know, versus calling out to, OpenAI or Claude, which are awesome. Um, Now we can maybe run it ourselves on our own servers. I think a lot of corporations are going to do this. And I think we're also going to have a lot more AI at the edge. So it'll be local to your device or built into the browser, which I'm also really excited about from a privacy and sort of performance point of view.
Hmm. You've often spoken about ecosystem thinking as a key philosophy for open source success.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on how this concept has shaped WordPress's growth over the years?
Yeah, I always try to think in systems. So what are the incentive models for everyone? So WordPress, there's the core software. There's also a directory of, 60,000 plugins and themes that extend it. That directory is built into the core. So in WP admin, you can install a plugin right there, just clicking a few buttons. We have a really robust auto update mechanism, which is key for keeping people secure and also getting the latest and greatest versions. We have no like app store charge or anything. So plugins are free to monetize. Now they need to do it on their own website. It's not
Hmm.
going through anything central. But then that means they can keep 100% of um, that revenue stream, or they can monetize lots of different ways, including like, there's, large like MailChimp and stuff that integrates with WordPress. So it allows for a really variety of business models, a lot of innovation. The other thing is, we think a lot about internationalization, um, education, the free online courses, documentation, uh, the blog, the website, how we talk about uh, our sort of philosophy, which is on there. And yeah, also how we sort of cultivate the community. Actually, one sadder thing that happened in the past, I think 18 months or 2 years, is we made it, well, it's sad and beautiful. We made a remembering page on
Mm.
WordPress.org because we've been around long enough now, 21 years, that some community members have passed away. Um, Actually, a gentleman just gave me from Creed Ally. They actually made a calendar for their WordCamp that sort of honors sort of different people on
Oh,
different
wow.
months. I thought this was really beautiful. It's from the remembering page. But this is also something key when you think about it. When you build a community, like a city or a town,
Hmm.
you need a way to sort of honor that as well. And it's really, people say the best part about WordPress is the other people. And so many friendships form. People who, they hit a hard part. There's a GoFundMe. I've done that, donated that dozens of times. People teach each other. It becomes kind of a community, a system of friendships, not just people working together.
Hmm. You brought up the GPL license earlier. How did you settle on that license specifically in the beginning?
B2 was under it. So as a
Ah, I
fork of
see.
B2, we had to be GPL.
Okay.
Now I've subsequently put pretty much all my creative work that we've ever published under the GPL as well,
Hmm.
even when we weren't required to because it wasn't part of WordPress or anything like that. Like I said, I like the sort of viral aspect of the license. The one big exception where we've dual license, so it's GPL and MPL, the Mozilla Public License, is Gutenberg, which is our block editor.
Hmm.
It's kind of the best visual block editor on the web right now, the best code base, I think, the most robust. And I wanted it used everywhere, including in mobile apps, um, other proprietary software. I'd be thrilled if Squarespace used Gutenberg. I think that'd be really cool. It'd be great for users, if we had kind of common code base, common interface between these things. So that's why we made that a more liberal license. You could
Right.
embed it with
Yeah.
commercial stuff and it's fine.
That's pretty cool. What is your vision for the future of WordPress, and where would you like it to be in 20 years?
Oh, well, 20 years is hard to predict. Because, gosh, if you had asked me to predict the past 20 years, I don't think I could have. But to sort of bring it a little closer, the phase we're working on right now of Gutenberg is all about collaboration.
Hmm.
So think like real-time co-editing, just like Google Docs or Notion. So you and I can be in the same, not just the document, but maybe editing the same website, moving blocks around, designing it together, commenting on it, sort of in a sidebar. Workflows, for the collaboration. So maybe, you could set up a site so someone can edit it, but you have to approve it before it goes live. I think some of that collaboration workflow stuff will also enable better multilingual flows. So sites that are published in multiple languages, which is our next phase of the fourth and final phase of Gutenberg. Um, that and then just there's a lot of the sort of block and tackle, the infrastructure stuff that people don't always appreciate. The next version of WordPress has a really cool improvement to how we hash passwords. Um, just as secure as before, but now sort of more cryptographically difficult to unhash. So if there was a brute force attack against it, it'd run a lot slower. So things like that are, if we do it right, no one notices. It's totally behind the scenes thing. But it's one of those things where we're just like constantly iterating and improving to make it a more robust, more secure platform.
Hmm. With the rise of AI and web development, how do you see WordPress integrating these technologies while maintaining its open source ethos?
Oh, they're not incompatible at all. So you can make GPL code, using Cursor or the AI tools. Um, you still have to check it and make sure it's you're unique and not coming from anywhere and stuff like that. But the models are getting better about that as well. I think AI is also going to be incredible for debugging and improving the security. When you think of across the 60,000 plugins and themes, it's so many millions of lines of code, a human could never review it all. And because of the accessibility of creating them, there's a lot of variability in the experience of the developers who have made these. Core of WordPress is incredibly secure now. It's very robust. It's got a lot of top PHP developers in the world working on it. But the plugins might have someone who just learned how to new, just like I was when I first learned. I might have some bugs in there. I think the AI is going to help people both learn faster and catch some of these bugs in automated ways. So I don't think we're far, maybe even in the next 12 to 18 months, where I'll be able to do like not just daily scans of everything already in there retroactively, but sort of real-time scanning of every change that can immediately pop back feedback like, hey, are sure this variable is being sanitized or,
Hmm.
that sort of thing.
Do you see AI being implemented from the end user perspective?
Like our end users?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
for
of
building
course.
pages, writing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People are already doing that with copy and paste, which is the universal API. I think we'll probably be able to build some stuff in there when we start to get more APIs from the operating systems in the browser.
Mhm.
So one of the things is people are like, oh, and we looked at this for WordPress.com, like, oh, should we build in AI features? And we built some, changing the headline or editing text. Um, but you kind of have to build every single integration for everywhere. It'd be better if it just worked for every text box, everything. And so I think that's really going to go to the more OS and browser level.
Hmm. Now, Automattic recently made the decision to significantly cut back contributions to the open source project.
Hmm?
What do you think the future is for WordPress development with this new strategy?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it cutting back as much as just taking a pause to focus on some internal priorities,
Hmm.
um, especially while we're going through this big legal battle right now. And so it's also saying to like WP Engine, like, hey, we're making the thing that you're benefiting from. So while you're suing us and attacking us and causing millions of dollars of legal fees, like, consider like what's the end game here? If you win, what do you win? It's like a dog chasing a car. Like you catch the car, what's next? So,
So, do you see a world maybe where you increase contributions again in the future?
oh, I'd love to get back to it. Yeah, it's very
Okay.
much core to our ethos. Um, yeah. And by the way, a lot of the things that we're doing are still open source. It's just not core WordPress. So, for example, all of WordPress.com, the Calypso and everything, that's all open source as well. It's GPL.
Can you touch on this? Is something that me, as maybe a more average end user, is a little bit confused about over the years. The unique things that you've developed with WordPress.com,
Mm-hmm.
like the little like the different dashboard. I don't know what words to use, but what is the thinking there? Because I don't believe that's open source. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Say that
Um,
again. The what?
the like the different skin in the WordPress.com dashboard,
Oh,
it feels
that's
like
open
a different.
source.
It is open
Yeah, yeah.
source.
That's what I
Oh,
was saying. It's called
okay.
Calypso, and
Ah,
it's GPL.
okay.
Although one of the things we're doing is unifying that interface. So if you log into WordPress.com today, it's actually going to look just like WP Admin. I
Okay.
think almost all the screens, if not all of them, are now back to core, because we found that different interface was it was better in some ways.
Hmm.
Honestly, it was worse in some ways for certain screens, like comment moderation, but it was just different. And there's a huge benefit to WordPress has a flywheel of people learn it, and then it's familiar wherever you go. So when you have a plugin or something like that, you don't want to change too much because you still want it to be intuitive to people.
And as the CEO of Automattic, how do you ensure that the company's business model supports and enhances the open source nature of WordPress rather than compromising it?
Oh, that's I think just key to our well, it's in our creed. Open source is the most powerful idea of my generation. It's part of our. If you check out automatic.com/creed, we have a really fun one there. Um, so I mean that's the root of our culture. I would say probably over the years, because of my sort of advocacy of open source and everything, we've attracted a lot of employees as well who believe in open source. So yeah, it's in the water.
Is there anything that you want to share with the community around the current happenings? There's people have many different feelings about what's
Sure.
going on. Maybe just your vision for the future. I know we kind of already talked about that, but
Yeah.
like the why behind this current situation.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the main thing I'd share is I hope it's over soon.
Yeah.
I'd love to welcome WP Engine back into the fold
Mm,
and really get them participating in work camps and everything just like they were before. I think that'd be fantastic. So I don't think you have to stand up for things. So I don't regret that. But I don't think that, a long drawn out multiple year thing really benefits anyone except lawyers making a lot of money.
for sure. Yeah, I saw there was a letter published from Automatic this morning
Yeah.
about that. So
Yeah, we fired our response to the legal stuff. It's so not Byzantine, but like things take a long time. I think the
sure.
next hearing is in like June,
Oh wow.
right? It's February, so like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of formal language and there's a judge and there's a certain way they expect things, even like how many pages your response can be, what time it goes in, and so I've been learning a lot about it as well. Fortunately, it's not something I've had to know anything about in my long business career, past 21 years of WordPress.
One thing you mentioned in your interview with Theo, which that was great, by the way. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
He touched on sort of which web host should a user feel comfortable going with, and you mentioned the ones listed on WordPress.org are a great choice.
Yeah.
But even those have changed over the years. Is there any
I'm
further
hoping we can
criteria?
expand that as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Because there's so many great new web hosts. You just walk around the sponsor booth here. By the way, all sponsors of WordCamp now are pretty thoroughly vetted to make sure they're good with the trademark and everything like that. I would say, for folks watching this, check out the contributions. So every host has a 5 for the future page, and sort of talks about how many hours they contribute back to the community-based stuff, and that's a great criteria, I think, to look at for where to go.
A few more questions. Is pineapple delicious on pizza?
I think so, yeah. And the pineapple here in Manila has been incredible, and the mango. So I don't know if I'd put mango on pizza, which is kind of funny, but well, maybe I'll have to try it. The fruit here is really, really good. I've had a lot of that.
I was in Indonesia for a week before this and
cool.
tried many exotic fruits, and
nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous we don't have them back in the U.S. now.
Yeah, well, and even the ones we do have, like I have mango in the U.S. and it's okay.
Yeah, it's not the same.
But Southeast Asia, I think, just kind of they've got, I don't know what it is. I hear India as well has like some incredible mango, so I'm definitely gonna explore that. I like how they serve it in Mexico. It's like some of the what's that called? The spicy thing, tahini. So I wish I brought some tahini on this trip.
Final question for you: what is your favorite flavor of hint water?
Yeah, we've got some here. I think right now I really like there's like a blueberry lemon one.
Okay,
that's pretty fun. The original watermelon is kind of like classic. So those are probably some of my go-tos, but honestly, I just like the variety. So it's kind of like I always have just a mix, and I've been mixing it more recently with some electrolytes. So there's this fun electrolyte powder called Dry Water, and it's super clean. It's got the sodium and all the good stuff that allows your body to actually absorb more of the hydration. Because I realize sometimes you can actually drink a lot of water and still be dehydrated.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, getting that salt, everything like that is really important. So that actually changes the flavor. Sometimes I'll put in a hint just to like mix it up.
Yeah,
and then sometimes I'll just put it in regular water.
I always see the hint water on the podium every time you do the Q&As.
Yeah.
I thought
sometimes you do that the taika as well, which is a nice matcha drink.
Nice.
I usually have one of those.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have to plug WordCamp Asia and WordCamps in general. If you've never been to one, definitely worth the trip out. It's very easy to get to, and like at least once you're here, very accessible to be part of. So definitely join in the community.
Yeah.
And
hope to see you at one of them in the future.
Yeah, Matt always does Q&As, so you can ask him your questions face to face.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks again.
I want to thank Matt Mullenweg for letting me interview him. I'm grateful for the opportunity I got to chat with him, and I appreciate his willingness to answer my questions despite the current legal situation. So there are 3 main takeaways that I got from the interview. First, WordPress was released under the GPL license because it had to be. It was a fork of B2, which was also under the GPL license. Personally, I think there would be much less drama if WordPress was released under the MIT license, so I'm glad that Gutenberg was released under MIT. The next clear message in Matt's answers was that he doesn't want this legal battle to go on for years. He seems to want WP Engine to drop the lawsuit, but I honestly don't think that's going to happen. So I hope that both sides can settle and reach an agreement, because it probably would take years for a trial to play out. The final and most important takeaway is that Automattic intends to increase WordPress core contributions once the legal battle concludes. It seems Matt may be doing this as a sanction of sorts to incentivize WP Engine to reach an agreement sooner, but he also made it clear that there's some cost aspect to it as well, as Automattic is currently spending a lot of money on legal fees. So what do you think of Matt's answers? Do you think WordPress has a bright future, or do you think it needs to go a different direction? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Last year, I interviewed Ghost's co-founder on open source philosophies. If you're curious how his ideologies compare to Matt's, you can check out that interview here.